Hello and welcome to a special Monday two-game slate. Establish the show. My name is Adam Levitan, joined by Cody Main, director of Niche Sports here. We aren't doing a Showdown show today, but Cody is still alive. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. The prize pools for the Showdown slates are dust, so we'll talk the two-game slate instead. I know people get up for these $1 million to first, the Millie Makers on these primetime slates, so it should be a fun Monday night doubleheader.
We are talking the two-game slate today, but as Cody said, our projections and Cody's breakdown and ownership is up for the main Showdown slate tonight. So if you're playing Showdown, be sure to check that out. Of course, if you go to DFS, you can see in the tab here all the content under Showdown for that. Projections here, two-game main slate. We're also joined by Gary Hartman, professional MME bro. How's it going, Gary?
It's good, man. It's good. Yeah, these two gamers are fun. Like, you think, hey, it's only two games, maybe we're getting duped a lot, but there are some fun ways to get different on these slates, and you can kind of get silly with some punts, and we'll talk it through.
Right. I think a main point to make on this is, while it's not a full slate, it is kind of like Showdown in that you can play a backup tight end, you can play a fourth wide receiver to try to get unique in these really large field lottos, and so it's like Showdown in that sense, whereas on a main slate, that stuff is just absolutely egregious, in my opinion. Let's start at the quarterback position. And so we have two of the best quarterbacks in fantasy on this slate in Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. I think what people are wondering, can Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill even work their way into the optimal on this slate? I am slightly skeptical. I think Cousins has a better chance of doing it than Tannehill does, especially because it's easy to project exactly how Kirk Cousins scores when he scores. But my lean is kind of to just be like, man, it's really hard to see either Cousins or Tannehill beating these guys. Let me just load up on Hurts and Allen. Obviously, that's what the field is going to do at a really high rate. You see our ownership projections here, 37-35. Gary, I'm curious from you, how much do you think we should be playing Cousins and Tannehill? They're up against such outrageous fantasy quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, you also see the value scores there with Hurts and Allen being significantly higher. It's not a secret who the best plays are on this slate from the quarterback position. But, on the DraftKings Millie tournament, we're looking at a 132,000 person field that is already 60,000 entries in. I mean, this is going to fill no problem. So we got to get a little bit unique here. I'm always team play the ceiling plays. In a lot of ways, play the best plays. And even though we have Ryan Tannehill sitting there at a full 1,000 less than even Kirk Cousins, I don't think I can get there on this slate. The probability of him, even when you adjust for cost, being the quarterback you need from a ceiling perspective compared to three guys that we know that can get there, at least two, maybe 2.5, it's really, really low. So I'm probably not really using Tannehill much at all. Cousins, on the other hand, if you want to play into that narrative that game goes way up, Jalen Hurts gets a little silly, turns the ball over a couple times. You could triple stack Cousins. You could do some weird things on this slate. I think Cousins is okay, but I'd still say around 80% of my lineups will have one of the top two guys.
Yeah, it's just so outrageous when you run and you throw like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts too. I mean, Jalen Hurts, you're talking about 8-9 rushes. I mean, he had a legit chance in week one at the rushing bonus on DraftKings, 100 yards, and the throwing bonus on DraftKings. We saw them come out, the Eagles did in week one, with an extremely pass-heavy game plan. I mean, they threw, I think it was on like 13 of their first 14 plays or something crazy like that was a called throw. I think Hurts certainly can beat Josh Allen, but I'm really struggling to see it on Cousins and Tannehill. Cody, what do you think about quarterback tonight?
Yeah, you guys brought up two really good points, and the first one being that, like, if it was just one of these guys, I could see a case for Kirk Cousins or Ryan Tannehill, but you have both of them, and I think you're asking for such a unique path for both of these guys to completely fail, where you have a situation where Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill can at least compete from a fantasy perspective. And then the second thing is, like, you're not even getting paid off with a massive discount for dropping down to Kirk Cousins. He's only $900 cheaper than Jalen Hurts, $1,600 cheaper than Josh Allen, is a little bit more significant. So yeah, Gary said 80%. I haven't decided exactly how I'm going to attack this slate from a contest selection standpoint, but I could make a case just to load up on both of these guys. We'll find ways to get different at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and DST position later, and just take your chances that both these guys are the top scoring quarterbacks in single entry and three max. I think there's a scenario where Jalen Hurts does get outsized ownership. That $700 could be meaningful on this slate, and the ceilings there are so close that I could see the field just gravitating towards the $700 in savings in a game that is projects to be a little bit more fantasy friendly in the Minnesota Philly game.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have all the money in the world here because we have Steph Diggs on this slate. We have Dalvin Cook on this slate. We have AJ Brown on this slate. I mean, we have a lot of really good players on this slate. So we don't have all the money in the world. So I agree with you. The 700 is going to go a long way. And therefore, we could see Hurts end up out owning Josh Allen. Let's go to running back. So the two of these backfields are full-blown committees with the Eagles and the Bills. The Vikings, and I want to start with Derrick Henry because I think it's one of the keys to the slate. So Derrick Henry, to me, his outcome is like kind of binary, right? Either the Titans play well, they stay in the game, they do it on the back of Derrick Henry, maybe they get a lead somehow on the back of Derrick Henry, and he just goes completely nuke. I would say that's unlikely. The more likely scenario to me is that the Bills overwhelm the Titans and the Titans aren't able to get off more than 15 or 16 Derrick Henry runs here. And at that point, he's extremely fragile to getting like 6 points or 7 points. And so, if we say 45% Derrick Henry on this slate, that's like an easy underweight / X out for me. I think the Titans were one of the worst number 1 seeds in the entire league last year. And I think they've gotten worse since last year. I have bets on there to miss the playoffs, under on their win total. I just think they're not a very good team. And so the Bills, to me, are like the best team in the league. And so we're not breaking any news here, but it's really hard to see Derrick Henry going off. Cody, I'll start with you on the Derrick Henry stuff. I mean, he's shoved it down my throat so many times before. This just seems like a really bad spot for him to shove it down my throat, especially if we think 45%. So we had to think about handling Derrick Henry tonight.
Yeah, the 45% number kind of is the selling point for me. If that had come in closer to 25, 30, even 35%, I think you could make a case for at least an with the field or an overweight stance on Derrick Henry. But 45% for, they didn't do us any favors on Derrick Henry's price. As we'll get into with wide receiver, the pricing is very soft with some of these wide receivers we can jam in that do have slate breaking upside. And I know it's there for Derrick Henry, but at 45% ownership, I'm at least taking an underweight stance and can see, being even more aggressive than just being underweight. 10-point road dog against a really good Buffalo Bills defense. I'll take my chances that the big dog doesn't bury me, which famous last words, right?
Right. Yeah, I'll take my chances there too. The one that I'm more scared of to fade is Dalvin Cook, who has a ridiculous role. I think the Eagles, which were once a really big pass funnel, in other words, they force offenses to go to the air against them. You can run on the Eagles now, and Dalvin Cook is such a good player. We know Alexander Madison's going to come in and play, 25, 30% of the snaps or so, but Dalvin is so efficient. So, I think everybody thinks Dalvin's a better play than Derrick Henry. Ownership reflects that at least to some degree. But once you play Dalvin, if you're playing an expensive quarterback and Dalvin, it starts to get a bit hairy from a salary perspective. Gary, what do you think about handling Dalvin tonight?
Yeah, I think Charlie makes an interesting point there in chat that, will he really get up to 50% on? Because I think most people are going to be more prone to jamming in Diggs, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown. Especially when you talk about traditional stacks, we have 2 of our favorite fantasy quarterbacks on this slate. So I wonder if he comes in a little bit under that and makes for a really interesting play. Because as you mentioned, he's one of the 2 teams that it's not full blown committee out here. The Eagles just got gashed by the Lions running backs last week. He could play into any script you want to talk yourself into in that game. So I think Dalvin's a really good play. And I just want to say I'm with you guys on Henry. A lot of the hype around Derrick Henry before he got hurt last year was that he was catching balls. I mean, they loved Dontrell Hilliard in that role last week. Obviously, Hilliard's out, so maybe there is some upside there. But I think that Henry is a clear level behind Dalvin Cook on this slate.
Okay, it's hard for me to stomach in the 2-game slate the backups on those teams. In other words, Madison and Hassan Haskins. Obviously, Hilliard is out for this game. It's hard for me to stomach the backups on those teams here. I just think the price, you don't save enough by going down to the backups there. I'm going to try to save money by figuring out some of these other backfields. Let's start with the Philly backfield. Cody, we know they're going to play all 3. I thought Miles Sanders looked good last week, and Miles Sanders had a bunch of goal line carries. He didn't convert all of them, but he had a bunch of goal line carries. I know Boston Scott came in and got a goal line carry. I know Kenny Gainwell scored a TD too. The way I see it is that Sanders has his own role, the starter and kind of the feature back early. Boston Scott is his direct backup and breather back. And then Kenny Gainwell has his own role, which is kind of a change of pace and third down back. And that's kind of how we have it projected here. So I think Gainwell and Boston Scott are both interesting. Certainly prefer Gainwell, considering they're only 300 apart on DraftKings. And so, yeah, one of like an immediate way to save money would be to go down to Gainwell, get the pass catching back in a potential shootout. I like that one. What do you think, Cody, of Eagles backfield stuff?
Yeah, and the only reason that I would push back on Cook's ownership and on Derrick Henry's ownership is the fact that like it gets really ugly really quickly in these 2-game slates with trying to fill out 2 running back spots, and then you also have to consider some flex ownership as well. So this is where a lot of my exposure will be going to. This Eagles backfield, I'll be playing it a variety of ways, but I think Sanders is an awesome play at the price tag. 5,500 is probably my favorite overall play regardless of ownership, and I think that maybe if we think Cook could come in lower or Henry comes in a little bit lower, he's probably the guy that gets steamed in favor of saving some salary at the position. But yeah, pretty good role in week 1. I think if this game plays close to the 2.5-point spread, then you're going to see quite a bit of Miles Sanders. And then conversely, like Kenneth Gainwell is going to be the guy that comes out there if they are trailing, if we get the big Kirk Cousins game, or if Hurts is a little bit inefficient and they fall behind early, then Gainwell is going to be the guy that's getting those pass down snaps. He ran a route was in on 69% of long down and distance snaps in week 1, 88% of 2-minute snaps. And at that $4,500 price tag, like it might only take a couple of drives. The way that he scores points and his explosiveness, like it might only take a couple of Kenneth Gainwell drives for him to end up being optimal this week.
I think if we're off on ownership here, it'll be that Sanders and Gainwell are tighter. In other words, Sanders comes down to like 35 or 40 and Gainwell comes up to 15 or 20. I could certainly see that, especially in some hand building formats where I think people will be looking at that. The other muddled backfield situation, Gary, is this Buffalo backfield. And so James Cook, I mean, it was not pretty for James Cook in week 1. Really tough NFL debut. Doesn't get in the game until the second quarter after Singletary and Moss already play. And then on his first NFL snap, he fumbles the football, loses it, only plays 2 more snaps the entire game. It's been 10 days, 9 days, whatever it's been. It's hard for me to see him getting completely unburied that fast, but maybe, and that would be kind of a showdown bro play. I'm much more interested, though, in not playing that and playing the Singletary and Moss stuff, given the prices. I don't think I can stomach Cook here and take a 0, though we haven't projected for 0 ownership. It won't be that. We'll fix up the ownerships here, but it'll probably be like 3-5% on James Cook. So any interest there? Any more thoughts on Buffalo backfield?
I mean, as thin as these cheap RBs get on this slate a little bit. I mean, we just talked about those Philly backfield. I prefer Boston Scott or Kenneth Gainwell in a vacuum over James Cook. Might even prefer Madison over Cook. I know he's a good, 1,200 more or whatever. But, just given him getting completely buried there, I think McDermott and crew trust Singletary and Moss. If I'm playing the showdown on that game, maybe I would sprinkle in some Cook, but it's going to be hard for me to get there on the 2-gamer. One thing I want to note on these kind of backfields. So like obviously with a 2-game slate, we're not going to be doing a lot of our normal type of rules and, correlation type stuff that we're going to do in an optimizer on a regular main slate, but it doesn't mean that we can't think about environments and the way to play into those types of things. Right. So I love Miles Sanders on this slate as well, but I'm more prone to playing Sanders when I'm going all in on the Buffalo game, for example. So if I think that's the game that shoots out, I want more of the between the tackles Eagles running back, right? Where if I'm playing into the Philly game as, over 49, maybe these teams are going back and forth, we're playing up pace, then I want Gainwell there. Similarly, I'd be like more prone to playing Moss in these really heavy Vikings Eagles lineups. I just think it's important to think about that kind of thing.
Oh, 100% be thinking about your lineup and how you think the games are going to go. Obviously, more run heavy, more Derrick Henry scripts is going to lead to slower games and more fewer plays for stuff like Bills pass game and stuff like that. So think about that for sure. One thing I'd say on Zach Moss, just before we move on here, Zach Moss ran a ton of routes last week. And so, he's kind of been pigeonholed as a 2-down back, kind of a grinder. He ran a ton of routes last week. He's not a stone 0 in the pass game. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
let's go to wide receiver here. So actually, let me just start with the Buffalo stuff, because I think that's one of the stories of the slate. Gabe Davis hurt his ankle, I believe, on Friday, and the reports from Mike Garafolo, and you guys can go to Mike Garafolo's Twitter and see the video. Mike Garafolo sounded pretty skeptical that Gabe Davis can be able to play in this game. And they're not ruling him out yet, but Mike Garafolo said it sounded to him like Gabe Davis is more doubtful than probable. And so we have him in for now. We'll obviously change it if we get more information that Gabe Davis is definitely going to be out. That opens up a massive, massive situation for the rest of the Bills wideout core. Now, Crowder and McKenzie are slot receivers, but Crowder can play outside. I think that's at least worth noting. And Crowder did play outside some last week. He could be a direct fill-in for Gabe Davis. Kumaro can certainly play outside, but he's kind of just a guy. They also have Khalil Shakir, the rookie, the 5th-round rookie. And it's always, I think, these kind of rookies get overhyped. These late round, people are all excited about Jalen Tolbert and Romeo Doubs. And, I just think people get out in front of their skis on these really late round rookie guys like that. And they actually underrate high value rookies like Drake London and Garrett Wilson and Jahan Dotson and stuff like that. That's a story for another day. I mean, I could talk forever about like Jalen Tolbert was being drafted ahead of like Jahan Dotson for like 4 months this summer. I mean, absolutely egregious. But anyways, I digress. If Gabe Davis is out, Cody, everybody's going to be trying to save money by going to some of these Bills wide receivers. Do you have a favorite here? And what do you think happens if Gabe is out?
Yeah, I think I'm going to let ownership kind of dictate what I do with the secondary Bills wide receivers. And I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but like I feel like Isaiah McKenzie's already a little bit overowned, and we and the market is already kind of projecting Gabe Davis in. So if Gabe Davis is out, I think Isaiah McKenzie's ownership is going to skyrocket. We saw it in the opener in the Showdown slate that his ownership was astronomical, and he goes out and produces. So I think he's going to be the highest owned secondary wide receiver, and probably for good reason, but I'd rather take my shots and just playing away from ownership with guys like Jameson Crowder, even a guy like Jake Kumaro, as just a way to get different. I would rather play guys like this at like wide receiver 3 and even wide receiver 4 spots that I know are going to be on the field in a 2-game slate than the guys that we just talked about at the running back position, like Alexander Madison and these guys that aren't even going to be on the field at all. So I would rather take my shots there. But ultimately, I'm going to have to kind of decide where ownership plays. I don't want to play a 40% owned Isaiah McKenzie when Jameson Crowder is going to be sitting there at 10%. So if we get that news late, it's better. But I think I'm going to kind of let ownership dictate what I do.
My guy is Jameson Crowder. I'll just go ahead. I'll say, Crowder's a veteran NFL wide receiver. If Gabe Davis misses, I think he can share time in the slot with Isaiah McKenzie as he did in week 1. And Isaiah McKenzie only ran a route on about half of the Josh Allen dropbacks week 1. And so he can share there and he can fill in for Gabe Davis on the outside, even if it's a rotation with guys like Kumaro and Shakir. So I like Jameson Crowder the best. Gary, I feel like this is an important thing. Any more thoughts on Bills wide receivers?
I was going to say the same thing. Crowder's my guy on this slate, even if Gabe Davis played on a 2-game slate at 4K and full point PPR. As you mentioned, I think it was a little bit closer of a split in the slot than maybe we expected coming out of camp there with McKenzie. And if Gabe Davis is out, I think Crowder's a smash play. Definitely like him either way, though. I think the Shakir Kumaro tier is going to be really interesting if Gabe Davis is out. I think you max 1 that group, but you play him a little bit, and we'll see what the ownership says and what the projections say. But they'll be in play on a 2-gamer.
Once, if and when Gabe Davis is ruled out, this Steph Diggs versus AJ Brown versus Justin Jefferson stuff is going to get tight, right? And I do think that AJ Brown is a cut below and the ownership's kind of the same. But if and when Gabe Davis gets ruled out, we'll have a much better projection on Steph Diggs. It'll be closer to Justin Jefferson most likely, and his ownership's going to go up. Cody, how do you think about handling the top of wide receiver here? Because all these guys, I think Justin Jefferson and Steph Diggs are cut above AJ Brown, but not by a lot. So what do you think about the top of wide receiver?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really loose in terms of pricing. You have a $7,500 Stephon Diggs who might be playing without Gabe Davis. You have a $7K AJ Brown who just led the league with like a 78% air yard share in week 1. Don't expect it to be that absurd coming in week 2, but he's clearly the alpha in Eagles, and it seems like there might be some truth to the best friend narrative. So we might need to update the narrative rankings. It seems like he is definitely Jalen Hurts' guy. The one thing that I will find interesting as we get closer to lock and kind of tighten up these ownership projections is like, how much money will the field find to get up to this 9K Justin Jefferson? Because I think he is clearly the best wide receiver, standalone wide receiver, price excluded on the slate, but then you throw in the 9K price tag and it gets really tough to play that. I think if there was one guy that I would come in underweight, and I know this guy could bury me, but I think it would be Justin Jefferson would be the guy that I would come in underweight on, just because of the 9K price tag. And it doesn't seem like the field is giving us any ownership discount for that price tag.
The scary part of the Justin Jefferson fade is that Kevin O'Connell, he came out and got Justin Jefferson on linebackers, on safeties, had him running wide open against the Packers. It was ridiculous the way that Justin Jefferson was used, ridiculous in a good way, the way he was used. So it's certainly a scary fan of Justin Jefferson, but I hear you. We're going to have to make some cuts somewhere. I also think Adam Thielen is underpriced. His role was fine week 1. He's going to be a bit touchdown dependent, but I think that's okay. okay. On the Philly side of things, Gary, I still like Devonta Smith. And as Cody mentioned, the best friends narrative is a real thing. I mean, all throughout the offseason, it was A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is only throwing at A.J. Brown. He's only throwing at A.J. Brown all training camp. And then in week 1, Devonta Smith had 0 catches on 5 targets. A.J. Brown goes completely nuke. I still think Devonta Smith is a really, really, really good player. The ownership gap I'm getting here is not enough, but the price savings are a lot. And then, you can mix in guys like Quez Watkins, I guess, but that's going to be a little bit thin, especially when he's only 1,200 less than Devonta. Gary, any thoughts on Eagles wide receivers?
Yeah, I think Quez I would need in my Hurts lineups only. At that point, I'm looking at the correlation, even on a 2-game slate. Devonta was the guy that was popular amongst us GPP bros last week. Obviously came up with the big goose egg to bury us all. I mean, we all knew the A.J. Brown reports were really starting to hype up in the second half of the offseason, but to see that kind of target share, such a clear part of the Eagles' game plan there. And just to see the Eagles be more pass heavy that maybe we were expecting. If he's going to be peppered with targets like that, it's really hard to avoid. I'm with you that I was hope that ownership gap would be a little bit bigger. I think what I'm going to do on this slate, though, I think I will lock one of Brown, Jefferson, or Diggs in every single lineup. And let all 3 of them go together. But I think I would be very surprised if one of these 3 alphas does not get there tonight. So I like Devonta though plenty. I think he's a strong GPP play for sure.
For sure, and yeah, I like Devonta a lot too. I think the ownership on Devonta is. Well, ownership actually looks pretty good for me on both those guys. I think people are going to try to save money with Devonta, even though he's a negative value. Yeah. I think there's no reason to think that he won't. Last one to talk about here is the Titans stuff. Treyland Burks was the number 4 wide receiver in week 1, but he played awesome. And I think it's hard for us to say for sure that his role is going to expand, but you can tell yourself a story that Treyland Burks played so well in week 1 that his role is going to expand. He's going to be on the field more. Treyland Burks looked very good. I mean, if the Titans want any chance of staying in this game with the explosive Bills offense, I feel like they need Treyland out there. You're just not saving that much money. I wish he was 3,500 or 3,300. How could you play Treyland Burks 4,200 over Devonta Smith 4,500 when Treyland Burks could run 10 routes in this game? So I don't have a ton of interest in these guys. I'm sure one of them is going to end up looking fine. Kyle Phillips has played well, but man, it's hard for me. What do you think about Titans stuff, Cody?
Yeah, and this is where we get into some kind of parallels between Showdown and the 2-game slate. Is Treyland Burks is kind of that same vicinity of being so bad that he's a good play, right? Because we're getting paid off with a massive ownership discount, 8.5% ownership. He's 4,200, which is probably overpriced for his week 1 role. But as you've talked about all off season, there's going to be room for this role to grow as they have to get this dude on the field in order to compete, in order to win games. And the 38% targets per route run rate in week 1 was fantastic. If he gets out there a little bit more in week 2, you could see him blow this $4,200 price tag out of the water. And this is another good way to get unique and to kind of save a little bit of salary. On the same token, Kyle Phillips, I think he's questionable. Maybe he's been deemed good to go already at this point. But I thought earlier I'd seen that he was questionable. Obviously, if he's out, that's going to boost Treyland Burks and Treyland Burks' ownership. But for Phillips himself, 3,600 is a really nice price tag. It doesn't seem like the field is gravitating there too much with 21% total ownership. And another good way for us to save a little bit of salary in order to jam in some of these studs with a $3,600 wide receiver 2 or 3.
Kyle Phillips can play, man. And I know I've talked about these late round rookies get overhyped. I mean, Kyle Phillips didn't have any hype at all. He was free throughout the draft process. He only comes in 3 wide receiver sets, which the Titans don't play a ton of, but I think it's at least okay on Kyle Phillips.
Yeah, 9 targets last week. I mean,
yeah,
he led them by a long shot. My problem with the Titans, and you hit it on the top, is I just think they're bad. I think they're a really bad team this year. I think Buffalo rolls, but we'll see.
Yeah. It could lead to a lot of attempts, though, at least.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That would be good for the underneath stuff to Phillips, for sure. And yeah, I like Burks and Phillips the best out of those. Okay, this is not Showdown, Cody. We actually have to play a tight end. So remove your Showdown hat here. We actually have to play a tight end. I prefer to punt. My first instinct was Irv Smith. If you looked at the usage from last week, though, Irv Smith was eased in because he didn't practice that much. He was out with a broken finger. He got a full week of practice in this week, though, and played last week. So he was number 3 tight end. But, man, if we were confident that he would have his role that we expected before the finger thing, Irv Smith at 3,200 would be a smash. He'd project for 8 points at 3,200 or so, I would guess. And Johnny Mundt and Ben Ellison wouldn't be out there at all. I think maybe we see that, but I don't know for sure. Cody, any thoughts on punting tight end or paying up. The most you can pay up on the slate is 4,700.
Yeah, and this is where you can start to save some salary. Like, right, you have Dallas Goedert at 4,700, going to be the probably the most popular tight end on the slate, but also the most expensive. I mean, you can start to see how it's possible that we can fit in all these stud running backs and wide receivers when it's really easy to save salary at tight end and DST, as we'll get to next. But it seems like the field is kind of there on Irv Smith coming back to a little bit closer to a full-time role in week 2 with 19% ownership. I mean, if you took his week 1 role at face value for what it was, this guy should be completely unowned, even at 3,200. But I'm kind of with you. I think that there's some truth to the narrative that, the finger and missing practice a little bit led to a weaker playing time in week 1, and there could be a bigger role in week 2. So I will likely be over that 19% in my runs, but I don't feel great about it because I think there's some chance that they just roll 2 or 3 tight ends and Johnny Munt ends up being the tight end 1 again.
That's the thing. They played well. They won the game easily. Like, why change it up, right? It might be what they're thinking, and I could certainly see that. Maybe Hooper is a little bit safer than Irv. Hooper, a veteran in a reasonable role, I think is fine. Swaim is out there plenty. A lot of people are excited about this Chig guy, Chig Okonkwo. I believe he only ran like 4 routes last week, and so that's going to be a tough sell for me. We haven't projected for 0.7. The guy that I think is kind of sneaky is Dawson Knox, who I know didn't have a good game week 1. I know he struggles to earn targets, but Dawson Knox is out there every snap with Josh Allen and has a red zone role. And so he's expensive. I think too expensive here at 4K on DraftKings. What is he on FanDuel real quick? At 4K on DraftKings, he's overpriced, but that'll keep the ownership down. Yeah, he's a little bit overpriced on FanDuel also at 5,500, but I think in terms of guys who can actually be a difference maker at tight end, Dawson Knox 28% can certainly score multiple touchdowns. I like that one. Gary, any thoughts on the tight end position?
Yeah, I think Knox is really good in the Allen doubles or triples, especially with no Gabe Davis. I think a lot of people would still go back to the McKenzie, and I already talked about liking Crowder, but I much prefer if you could get up to Knox rather than these true punt, Kumaro, Shakir types. I think the floor ceiling combo there is really strong. There, I think the Titans guys are interesting punts. Like Okonkwo in the big field, they use him in like some end around. He's an athletic fourth round rookie from Maryland. I don't think it's terrible. And then Swaim, obviously on max 1, that was Titans tight end room, but I think they're decent punts. We saw Higbee have a ton of targets in garbage time against the Bills last week, so we could see something similar here with the easy checkdowns as the Titans are trying to come back. And then Goddard. I mean, Goddard I think has a clear high ceiling on this slate. But we saw that AJ Brown target share just be enormous last week. So.
Jerry likes Dallas Goedert.
Yeah,
Hold on 1 second, Jerry. You guys go ahead to tight end. Let me grab her.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to bring up that there is some parallels between Showdown and this slate in particular is there is not one guy that I could see obviously separating from the tight end position. And when I see that, there's no Travis Kelce, there's no Mark Andrews, there's no Darren Waller, there's no George Kittle. Like when I see that, is it possible that Dallas Goedert just scores 6 points and Johnny Munt is the guy that falls into the end zone with like a 1.81 receiving line and has 8.8 and is the guy you need? This is like the position that if you just want to find a way to get unique and aren't worried about any one of these guys separating, this is the spot where you can play a complete dust ball because you're really just hoping that they fall in the end zone. And that's one way to A, get unique, and B, save salary.
Yeah, and I think using the tight end in the flex, if you're going Knox or Goddard, is actually okay here for sure with those true punts, because it certainly could be a slate where you need to jam as many stars as possible. Like I would not be surprised with all the firepower at receiver and Cook and Henry and expensive, really high ceiling quarterbacks. Like it's in play.
Okay, at defense on DraftKings, Bills are to me the clear best play at 3,200. If you need to save the money, I'm okay with it because it's a defense and it's really hard to project, of course. On FanDuel, however, the Bills are outsized price. I mean, you can save a ton of money on FanDuel by going down to the Eagles. I don't really like playing the Titans that much, but certainly wouldn't mind going down to the Eagles on FanDuel. I think it's pretty self-explanatory here. But Gary, any thoughts on defenses for the 2-game slate?
Yeah. Someone in chat mentioning about, saving money and you definitely can tonight. Like, I think, I'd let almost $1,000, I think, hang around if you like your correlation stuff. So, if you are playing a couple punts in there based on the kind of the game scripts that you're going for, I definitely like the Bills the most if you could afford it. At home, 10 days rest, Tannehill. There's the Bills defense looked amazing in week 1. That front seven with Von Miller coming over, they can wreak havoc for sure. The Titans offensive line problems are real right now as well, especially the interior of that offensive line. So Ed Oliver can be heard from tonight. I think the Bills have the highest ceiling by a long shot on this slate.
Cody, any defense thoughts? And then we can get to some questions. If you guys have any, you can start sharing them in the chat.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll reiterate that you've talked about a lot, that I've talked about a lot on Showdown slates, is we are terrible at predicting DST performance, and playing into lower ownership makes sense regardless of who else is playing in your lineup. And this is one point that I wanted to drive home too, from like a correlation / game theory standpoint. You could have 3 or 4 skill position players from the Vikings and still play the Eagles DST. Right, like I would probably cap it at maybe 4. Like if you've got like a Kirk and Jefferson and Cook lineup, like maybe you don't want to play the Eagles DST, but you're really hoping for that pick 6, that strip sack, something like that to boost your scoring, and then the offense is back on the field. With these 2-game slates, you can't have perfect correlation throughout your entire lineup, and doing some weird things like this is one way to get unique, and one way that maybe you just capture the highest scoring DST regardless of who else is in your lineup.
All right, you guys, we have about 3-4 minutes for questions. Then we'll get to flag plants, and then we will get out of here.
Chat's been quiet tonight.
Smash says, is Monday Night Football and small slates like this only good for tournaments? So the edge is smaller. The edge is certainly smaller. I know what you mean. Should we be playing? Essentially, what you're asking is, should we be playing cash on small slates? Edge is going to be a lot smaller. It's harder for our opponents to make mistakes. There's way, way, way more variance. They don't have to, we look over an entire field. It's so clear what maybe the top 3 to 5 cash plays are at each position. Here, I think there's a bunch of different ways that you could go. So yeah, there's certainly more variance. So, I think cash is okay on the slate if you get the right games, but yeah, tournaments are probably more fun. I think just in general, smaller slates are not as skilled or edge-based. That's not to say Showdown is not, because I think there's a massive skill going to Showdown in terms of roster construction, not necessarily the players, but the roster construction in Showdown is massive, massive, massive skill. Thoughts on double running back from the same team tonight? That's an interesting thought. Could certainly do it with Buffalo and Philly. Cody, what do you think about playing 2 running backs from the same teams in one lineup tonight?
Yeah, those are the 2 backfields that came to mind. I think it's totally okay given the price tags and given the other options available at running back. You're really just hoping that one of or both of Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry don't run away from you tonight. And in that case, you're saving the salary, and you hope it's just the wide receivers that get there. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I don't love it nearly as much as I do on Showdown, but I think it's in play. I'd still be negatively correlating these guys, especially the Eagles thing. Like, they score in such specific ways. But
yeah. Somebody had a question. Oh, Big Dale says, why does the guy on top look like a burnt raisin? It's a fair question, Dale. This is what is called a bronzed Adonis. Okay, so you worry about you.
Yeah, the trolls are out. The trolls are out here. For sure.
Do you think Justin Jefferson is a must tonight? I don't think anyone is a must. And as Cody said, Justin Jefferson is very, very expensive and very, very owned. And so anytime you get someone very expensive and very owned, there's going to be room for a fade. I think Justin Jefferson is going to have an awesome game tonight. But from a game theory perspective, I think you can certainly fade Justin Jefferson. I mean, he's 9,200 on FanDuel and going to be 50+% and owned is all fade. Burger only separated by 200. My take is if Gabe Davis is out, I think I'll go Crowder. If Gabe Davis is in, I can make a case for Burks. But yeah, do you guys have a question about that? I mean, have an answer for that?
I like Crowder either way there.
Yeah, I'm with you. If Gabe is out, it's for sure Crowder.
Okay. Let's see here. Does James Cook get work if the Bills go up 2+ scores? I think they'd have to go up more than that. I think it would have to be like full-blown, backups are in, Josh Allen's out. Doesn't mean James Cook won't rotate in a little bit tonight, but for James Cook to be like a featured guy, I think they'll have to be up by at least 3 scores. Do you have a position on flex, wide receiver or running back or tight end? You guys already mentioned the double tight end stuff to save money. I think that's at least interesting. But yeah, any thoughts on the flex position here tonight?
I think given the state of the running back position on this slate, I would most likely be playing a wide receiver at flex and hoping for that upside. But Gary's double tight end stuff makes sense. Like if you get the $2,500 guy that happens to fall in the end zone, it might be enough.
Yeah, I was hand building a lineup before, and I like ended up with like an Allen triple with Knox and tight end, and threw like a Conquo or a 2,500 guy there in flex, and then you're able to get like AJ Brown, Jefferson, and one of the running backs too. Like that could easily be the way for me, and almost like in the super large field, my preference in order might be wide receiver, punt, tight end, running back, as it like in the way I'd like to approach flex.
All right, last one here: Haskins or Cook. Haskins, I think, has a more solidified role. I think James Cook is a better player, but yeah, I would feel better about the Haskins stuff and hope that the Titans get behind big and just give up on Derrick Henry, and you have Haskins there, hopefully catching some dump offs. Any thoughts from you guys on Haskins versus Cook?
Do you know how he profiles? Like if they're, clearly they were very willing to use a clear pass catching back with Hilliard last week. Like they had him out there all the time. They were targeting him. He lucked his way into 2 receiving touchdowns. I'm looking at Haskins had 24 catches for 171 yards last year in Michigan. Like if the guy could catch balls, I don't mind him on the other side of Bill's stuff. I really don't.
He can catch balls. Yeah. I think that's at least interesting in scripts where you think the Buffalo completely blows them out. I think Haskins is interesting. Right. He's just so expensive. I mean, 4,200 is just such an outrageous price for him. It'll keep the ownership low, but my God, I mean, how can you make teams with Haskins at 4,200? It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. I'll give you one showdown here for captain Cody. Cody's focused on the main one, right? On the Eagles.
Yeah.
Vikings. Go ahead of captain for the showdown slate.
Yeah, I think it's Justin Jefferson in that slate. And the reason why is he's 13K. Like we very rarely see players that priced up in showdown, and the 13K price tag. I know it's Justin Jefferson. I know he's still going to be owned, but it's really freaking hard to build good teams around a 13K Justin Jefferson at captain. So I think that might squeeze ownership a little bit. So give me the best wide receiver in football at captain.
All right. Best wide receiver in football. It's an affront to Cooper Kupp, but I probably agree. Okay.
It's crazy.
We've gone long enough for a 2-game slate here. We will go to the flag plan portion of the program. Gary, if you are ready, I will give you the honors to flag the plan, plant the flag.
All right, cool. Between 2 guys, I'm going to go with the guy we've been talking about all slate. I love Jameson Crowder here. I like him whether Gabe Davis plays or not, but I love him if Davis miss. I'm with Adam that I think he can take some outside work for sure. We know he's an established veteran. He drew a couple targets last week, even in being the 4th receiver down that depth chart. Is cheap, makes for can make for some unique combinations in Buffalo stuff. He makes a lot of sense for me here.
Okay, I like it. Jameson Crowder, go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this guy all off season. It was a rough preseason for this guy, but he still has 1st-round draft capital. He was an absolute baller in his time on the field in week 1 with 38% targets per route run rate. I think he's going to get on the field more in week 2. We need to save some salary, and we need to get some low-owned plays alongside these stars. So give me Treyland Burks at 8.5% ownership, $4,200.
All right, Treyland Burks, baby. Oh my God, Twitter's going to break if Treyland Burks goes off tonight. It'll be so good. All right, I am actually going to go to the tight end position. And so guys who can get multiple touchdowns on this slate at reasonably low ownership, I think are really, really valuable. The Bills have a lot of plays for tight ends around the red zone. We've seen that. It's not always the Dawson Knox, but they do have a lot of plays for tight end around the goal line. And Dawson Knox is going to be out there for almost every snap with Josh Allen. It's just so valuable. I know people are frustrated with Dawson Knox's week 1 game. There's a lot of games where he only gets 2 or 3 targets. He's not a great target earner, but man, there's games where he gets 5 or 6 targets and 2 or 3 of them are in the end zone. And so I'll take my shot there on Dawson Knox at 4K. And I don't think he'll get above 30% ownership. We have 28% here. I could see that coming in maybe a hair lower also because he's kind of close to Dallas Goedert, who's so clearly the best tight end play. All right. That is going to do it for the 2-game slate show. Be sure you guys subscribe to here on YouTube. We continue to bring you free content that you can't find anywhere else. Appreciate y'all for being here. For Gary, for Cody, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.